Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to thinkBIM Summer Conference on GreenBIM, exploring sustainability through a digital lens. We're going to actually dive straight into our first presentation from James Simpson, and over to you, James. And I'll let you do your introduction.
Thank you very much, and apologies everyone for rushing on my behalf. I have two jobs. One of them is a part-time lecturer at a university, and students are all planning to be at an event this afternoon that I'm taking them to, and we couldn't move the tickets, so I didn't want them to be out of pocket. So sorry for the rush. So I'm going to share my slides, and I've got some cool stuff to show you, which is probably a little bit different from what anyone else is going to show later on. Feel free to chuck some questions in Slido as we go, and I'll explain who I am and what I'm doing and why I'm relevant, I think, to the BIM conversation. So I just want to get you up so I can still see you all. So my background is in theatre, and I work in the theatre industry, and I spent a few years working in architecture as well. So when I graduated from a lighting design degree, where I was trying to do how to make lighting for theatre companies, I went to work first of all as an architectural lighting designer and ended up working in 3D visualization, and specifically BIM. It was around about 2004, 2005 when I was doing this. So it was about the time that BIM was sort of emerging as a tool in the architectural and construction practices. And I got a job at the Royal Opera House, where I ended up being for 10 years. But when I went there as their 3D visualizer, I came in fully expecting BIM to be something they'd heard of, and they hadn't. And I did some research, and I asked every theatre I could think of. There's quite a nice, tightly knit community of theatre practitioners, and particularly people working in the CAD and drafting area of theatre productions. And no one had been using BIM. Some people had heard of it and they started looking at it, but considering that what we do, in particular places like the Royal Opera House, was to make basically buildings that move around on stage. It's the full construction process that exists in traditional construction, but we're doing it in a way that it can be built on wheels, it can be moved around, it can be taken up and down in a day, so you can put it in the back of a truck and move it to your next venue. The scenery can weigh anything from a few hundred kilos to several ton. I think the biggest bit of scenery I've ever seen is 25 tons that could sit on the stage at the Royal Opera House. So the BIM process I felt would be really relevant. So I'm afraid I haven't got much to tell you about BIM in theatre, because we don't do much. But what I have done since then is I started a PhD in 3D visualization, and I made it my mission to try to discover how we can improve the design process for theatre creation using some of the tools that have come out of other industries, for instance, BIM from construction. I'm also looking at the gaming industry and the film industry to look for ways that we can improve the design process. And what I'm going to show you today is what my new company, Copper Candle, is doing, and how we've been looking at other forms of visualization to help design buildings and design theatre using the principles of the building industry. So there's some cool slides in here that are kind of going to be probably a little different from anyone else is going to show today, but it gives you an idea of where the theatre industry is at and how we're learning from what you're doing. So this was me about 5 or 6 years ago, actually, at the Royal Opera House. This is a studio that we used to design our productions in. So we had a virtual version of the stage. We could program the lighting on the lighting desk. So Joe sitting in the middle there is controlling all the lights using the same lighting desk that we used to use on the stage. I have to keep saying that in the past tense because I'm not there anymore, but they still do it now as a practice. The lighting designer would be in the space designing the lights, basically saying, I want one to be over here, I want it to point that way, let's bring the scenery in, and I'd be controlling it all in the background, designing all the models and setting it all up. It's the sort of thing we would do. This is a production of Carmen, the ballet, so we can see how it would look on the stage. And then we had some big projects that came in, like the BAFTA Awards and the Olivia Awards, so we would design all the lighting for these in advance as well. And we'd probably spend about, for something like the Olivia Awards, which was a very big production, we spend about a week designing the looks and creating all the cues for the lighting and the lighting desk in our studio using the pre-visualization, and take it onto the stage, and we then have 6 hours to turn it into a production that's going to a live broadcast to 200,000 people. So it was a lot of pressure to deliver, and everything had to be accurate, and accuracy is not something the theatre industry does a lot of, because everything's so flexible in the theatre environment. You can move things around on the bars, you can just quickly get your saw out and fix it. It's the way people work. They're not used to the idea of a lot of preparation and planning. So my PhD sort of, I'm going to throw a bit of this in here because it's, you know, I think you'll find it relevant. This is how our process breaks down in theatre at the moment. We have kind of the early producing model where people start having conversations. It progresses into a basic white card model, which is very bland, just basic structures. We kind of use that as a way of getting a sense of how the production might look. There might be some rehearsals where we start to see all this stuff fit together, and eventually this culminates in rehearsals on the stage and the opening night. And that's the end. First night, nothing changes. Everyone's contracts end in terms of the design anyway. They walk away from the production, and unless they're commissioned to come back and make changes, that's the end of it. So I started looking at design thinking, which is something that's come out of the construction industry by Rose. And the idea of this is a much more iterative process. You know, when the building's built, it's done. You don't want to change it, which is kind of similar to the way the theatre industry works. So I'm wondering, why is it that architects will spend so long iterating their designs? You go through this process of what you call empathize. That's understanding what the need is, what's the community need, what's the building's use. And then you start to define what that might actually be in more concrete terms. And then you start to have ideas that come out of those methods. You prototype it in a very basic form, various levels of that, with visualization, and then you go back to the beginning again and you keep reworking it. And this is something I experienced when I was working in architecture, and this makes lots of sense. You only get one chance to build the building. You don't want to make changes. Changes are expensive. So this is very sensible that you keep iterating the idea over and over again. And I've tried to map these against where they are in the theatre process, and you can see that we just have this waterfall process. We never go back. You know, at each stage, the design gets better and better in theory. And sometimes I've seen we get, you know, as far as the previews, and you realise that the show's not going to work, and you go, what are we going to do? The show either gets pulled, or they go right back to the beginning and design everything from scratch, but do it in about 6 hours, or the opening night happens regardless, and the show fails and all the money's lost. So I postulate that there's a method here that we can take from architecture and construction where we use iteration to make our productions more efficient. How have I been doing this? Well, I got very excited about game engines, particularly VR when that came about. This is a design tool that the Opera House was using when I was there, that I built for them. The idea is that a designer puts on a VR headset and they can walk around the stage. And, you know, this isn't new. You know, you've probably all seen these before, but, you know, in 2017, when I brought this along, it solved loads of problems. We were looking at our designs in a very different way. It wasn't this production, but one very similar to it. There was a cantilevered bridge that came out over the side of the stage, where Jonas Kaufmann made his entrance, and this is a very famous baritone who was playing the part of Othello for the very first time. Really big deal in the opera community. It was lost on me, but people were queuing up to buy the tickets. They sold out in hours. It just all went. Everyone wanted to come and see him, and this big entrance was everything. And we looked at the moment in VR and realised something that plans couldn't tell us. Even a 3D model couldn't really identify it. Is that the cantilevered bridge was hiding him. He was standing on it, and when you looked at it from underneath, which was the most expensive seats, he was being hidden by the bridge that was supporting him. So we completely redesigned that moment and saved a lot of frustration that we'd have discovered when we were on stage. So VR works as a way of helping us design our productions, and you can get an idea here by looking at the scenery from the back, just how it's you know, the other side of the stage. It's not anywhere near as pretty, but the construction tools and methods are exactly the same as you'd have in the construction industry. A little bit less cement and concrete, but you know, a lot of welding and a lot of plastering. We progressed this to something else that's gone too far. Let me go back. We started using the HoloLens to do mixed reality on stage. So rather than seeing it in VR in a studio or in a you know, an office somewhere, we went into the actual tutorium and used the mixed reality tools to put this on the stage. Now, at the time, we were looking at Trimble systems, SketchUp systems. They were working quite close to HoloLens, and they've all been designed for architecture and construction. These tools were being created, and I built this one myself in the game engine Unity, and it's actually on the store. No one ever uses it, but you can create anything you want using this app, build objects, place them on the stage, see how things look. And that process allows designers to have a very iterative conversation very early on in the process, just to say, how big does this need to be? Where does it need to sit? What's the what's the dramaturgical sort of point of view here? Like, where's the narrative coming? Where's the story? Is the story really, being told correctly here? Because somebody that's looking for a window and seeing their jilted lover kissing another woman, if that's not visible to an audience member, the story's lost. So it's really important that at the very beginning of the process, you understand those foundational moments. And of course, with this system, we were able to let the stage crew continue doing whatever they were doing on stage without bothering them. So we had a full scenery of our next production sitting on stage with people just walking around, doing, oblivious to what we were doing, which was designing the next production. You can walk anywhere in the auditorium, you can sit in a seat and see how it's going to look. It was a really cool tool, and I've developed that a bit more, which I'll talk about in a moment. So another practice I wanted to share with you is volumetric capture. The thing that I'm focusing on at the moment in my PhD is how to capture the performers into the visualization. So in construction, you think very much about the users and the user's experience. Our users are the audience, but the human element that can't be covered is the performer that's on the stage. So we're looking at several different methods for capturing the performer and including them into our digital visualizations. So this is Carlos Acosta, a famous choreographer, and we were capturing this moment in a volumetric scan. So we had two Azure Connect cameras. I'm actually talking to one at the moment. They're positioned sort of at 45 degrees to each other, and they create a real-time 3D scan of the performers, which you can see on the screen on my laptop. And I did show this video earlier, and people were, am I at the right conference? This is what that culminated in, which is, I don't know if you can hear the music if it's playing. I don't think I enabled sound when I turned this on, but these are little humans that are performing on a screen. Now this is AR, it's coming off a phone, but that is a visualization. You put that on a scale model box of our scenery with a 1:25 scale person on it, and we can see how it would look to have the human element included in the physical. And this is something that's not being practiced at the moment. I don't think it's been practiced in any industry enough to understand what do human beings look like in our visualization. Another example of this is a tool that we built for allow people to perform on stage while they were on lockdown. I don't know if the music's going to play, so I'm just going to play a little section of this and I'll let you get a flavour of it. I'm just going to warn you though, this is Mel Brooks' production of The Producers, and if you haven't seen it before or don't know about it, you won't understand that it's a comedy that takes the mick out of Hitler in one of its productions. So that's why Hitler's on this stage. It's not because of any right-wing leanings or anything. So I'm just going to skip it forward to the middle. I don't know if the sound's playing, if you can hear that.
The sound is.
Just so you can see that it is a comedy of Hitler. But the idea is that we sent green screen kits with GoPros to people to record themselves in their homes, and we could then stitch those back into Unreal Engine, which is another game engine. All of this content was meant to allow these people to perform on stage, but what we realized is that they were planning on doing a production as producers in the future, and this became a visualization tool for them. They started to plan where they're going to stand and what the scenery might look like by communicating to us via these tools, but they were doing this whilst they were at home. So once again, we've put a human element into a 3D design, something that's traditionally quite static. What we also have done is we've included in this the lighting tools that we had right at the beginning. So I was explaining how we use a lighting desk to control and move the lights in some custom software that's made for the theatre industry. But now in a computer game engine, such as Unreal or Unity, we're able to plug in a lighting desk and control the movement of the scenery. We can control the movement of the lights and include live human beings that can be streamed into that system using effectively platforms like Zoom, but things that are customized for game engines, so that we can see what they look like and standing on the stage in real time, and we can broadcast that to a YouTube live site and say, well, go and take a step to your left, right, that's your spot there, let's see the scenery come in, how does that work? Because in theatre the design isn't just the one image, it happens over a period of time. So we're interested in visualizing the time element of the production as well as the look of the building, which is something that architecture and construction doesn't have to be so concerned with. Now a bit of light relief. I've got a little video here which demonstrates another technology that we've been using to put human beings into our systems, and that's motion capture. And if you've never seen motion capture before, this is a colleague of mine using our motion capture studio, and it's it's a bit tongue in cheek, but it's quite fun. Of course, we can put anybody in motion capture. The motion capture data is created in a studio. So in the background of this picture, you can see somebody wearing a grey suit with sort of green and yellow dots on. And we can put any avatar over them. So my colleague didn't know I was going to do a stormtrooper. I didn't know I was going to do a stormtrooper when we filmed that, but we created the content and then had some fun of it afterwards and tried to see what we could do. So it works in the design process because we didn't have to think too hard about the design. But what we've done with this production is put the motion capture into an AR experience. Well, this is actually a performance that we did, but we have discovered that it's another great way of visualizing a production. Somebody can be in motion capture, and when they move around in the space, we can see how they look relative to the scenery. And now, during the pandemic, we had directors and designers in other parts of the world trying to communicate via Zoom to design the next production. And what we realized we could do with this platform, although we haven't tested it yet, is have that AR avatar performing onto a scale model box again. So we can either create a scale model box in the AR visualization, or we can have a physical thing and look at it with a phone and see the little person running around on it. But that can be live, so they can feed back directly to a studio with the real performers in it performing into this system. And it's interesting, I was at a conference yesterday for theatre lighting industry professionals, and they were talking about how they all coped during the pandemic creating theatre. And whilst Japan was open and the UK was in full lockdown, one colleague of mine created a revival of the production The Waitress in Japan, and did it all via Zoom. And they had a lighting desk in an office in London and were controlling the lights in Japan and looking at it on a camera that's being streamed back to them. So loads of people in our industry are trying to find ways to communicate and collaborate remotely. But we can't just share CAD models and 3D models indefinitely. Ultimately, our medium is the stage, and we come together to create something in that one place, and that's where the creativity happens. So trying to find alternatives that could give the human element, put the performer back into that space, meant we could continue to work whilst remote. So these are quite cool tools. I've got a few more examples of motion capture which I want to talk about, because now I'm specifically into my PhD research, which is really closely linked to what we're talking about today. In this studio, we have a screen that shows us the motion capture performance. So all these people walk around the studio in their funny outfits. They're being represented by avatars in the screen. My colleague Andy at the front here is operating a theatrical lighting desk. This is the same system we use to turn lights on and off in the studios or the theatres we work in, but we're using to control the lighting and the scenery in the game engine. So we're able to have a very iterative process where we're looking at what we're seeing on the screen and saying, does this work narratively? Does this work dramaturgically? Is the performer in the right place? Is that spotlight on them? Do we want shadow in a different direction? A lot of those very creative decisions, but rather than having to get a game developer at £800 a day to come in and make those tweaks, we can just do it live on a lighting desk using the amazingly talented people we have in the theatre industry that know how to use this equipment. So it's quite an opportunity to be able to design productions this way. And as this is a production that's designed to be sent to audiences, the idea is you watch it through this medium. It's actually convenient that we're designing in the same medium that we're presenting in eventually. Another couple of examples of these. This is a choreographer who was tap dancing as an ogre. Just a bit of light relief. The more serious version of this is that we were trying to design the entire production of Shrek the Musical, and we did that with one person playing all the parts. So if you ever listen, you can hear the music. So Danielle was playing each part one at a time, and we're seeing her moving. So she turned up to the studio that day not aware of her dance. She didn't know how she was going to make it. So she designed it all in the space using the avatar of herself moving around in the 3D scenery as a way of understanding where it sits. We actually did this using Magic Leap technology, which is this, and virtual reality technology, which is this. If you haven't seen these before, this is mixed reality, augmented reality glasses, like kind of an evolution from the HoloLens. And obviously VR, which we all know and love, different reasons. So she wore a VR headset and could see the scenery around her, and then could design the dance by seeing where everything was and performing. Meanwhile, she'd say to us, could we move that bit of scenery to the right? And we'd move it on the lighting desk, and we'd see it move both on our screen and in the VR experience. Same thing on the Magic Leap. We could see a hologram of the experience, and she'd be wearing this while she was dancing. It wasn't easy because it flaps around and they're quite heavy, but we could then see how it all worked together. And how this all sort of culminates is in what I felt was quite a theatrical process. So I've got a couple of little videos here that just show how that process worked. And if you've never been in a theatre environment before, if you've never seen a rehearsal, you have to take my word for it that what you're about to see is exactly the same as the way that we work in the studio when we're looking at the stage, but instead we're looking at a screen with motion capture data. So that's Rory, the director, and he's talking the motion capture performers around the scenery, helping them understand what it's going to look like. So this is visualization happening right here. It's design iteration. They're trying to understand where the performers are relative to the scenery and make intelligent design decisions. And then this culminated in a piece of performance like this. Now, just to finish, my research, where it's going now, I'll stop sharing, is I'm interested in the value of liveness. In theatre, we do a lot of live live creations. People come to the theatre to watch them because it's real and live. But when you're looking at something for a screen, you've got to query what is the value of it being live? What's the reason for watching it live? Because watch TV and films pre-recorded, and we don't ever get upset that Thor wasn't really doing that live. When we watch the Avengers, or the Hulk isn't really that green in real life. We know it's fake. We have a suspension of disbelief, and we go into that world. So what we're looking at doing now is try to understand where the almost like trying to distill. If it's a science experiment, like putting a test tube, what is the value of being live in theatre? What is it? We know it exists. We know we prefer to go to a theatre and watch it for real, but why? And we're about to conduct an experiment about 3 weeks where we're going to run that clip that we're recording at the moment. We're going to have a live version of it streamed to people's home computers, and half of them will get a link to YouTube Live with the live stream, and half of them will get a link to a pre-recorded version without being told. And we're going to question them at the end to understand which one is live and which one's not. See if they even realised. Yeah. So just to sum up. The work that I'm doing is about trying to find ways to make pre-visualization sort of work in the theatre industry in the same way that it benefits the construction and architectural industry. And the tools that are coming out in architecture is always about 10 years ahead of the theatre industry. So we're just starting to move away from AutoCAD and into 3D modelling. And when I joined the Royal Opera House in 2006, we were just starting to use AutoCAD at the time that the architectural industry was just starting to use BIM. So I'm very excited to see what your community is producing. I say our community, I feel like part of it as well. And yeah, because I expect it will come into the theatre industry in about 10 years' time. So I'm hoping that I've just sort my presentation being completely out left field of everyone else talking today kind of demonstrates a little bit of what I'm hoping you're going to achieve for us, so we can borrow that knowledge in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here, and I'm really sorry for making such a rush.